So good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to share this year's budget's highlights. Saskatchewan is back on track. Our economy is on track. More than 30,000 new jobs have been created in our province over the past year, and Saskatchewan has the second highest rate of job growth in Canada so far in 2022. Our finances are on track. A $463 million deficit forecast for this year is a more than $2.1 billion improvement from the budget last year. Through the next 3 years, the path to balance shows successively smaller deficits with a balanced budget expected for 2026-27. The stronger economy and strong revenue growth means our ability to deliver the best possible government services is on track. The budget makes record investment in healthcare, education, and many other important services Saskatchewan people expect and deserve. This budget makes a significant commitment to improving healthcare services in Saskatchewan, which has been significantly disrupted over the past 2 years as our dedicated healthcare professionals managed through the pandemic. The total budget for healthcare is $6.8 billion, up 4.4% from last year. An increase of $21.6 million will address the surgical wait list and fund thousands of additional surgeries this year. It is the first year of a 3-year plan to deliver on the largest volume of surgical procedures in the history of our province. This aggressive plan targets a return to pre-pandemic levels for surgical wait times by the end of March 2025. A $17 million increase in this budget supports our seniors to live safely and comfortably and includes several important initiatives. Among them is a $4.8 million increase in home care services, $4.1 million to provide high-dose influenza vaccinations to adults over 65, $1.6 million for operations at Meadow Lake Northwest Community Lodge, and $6.5 million in new funding for an additional 117 continuing care aid positions. The new care aid positions represent the second year of a 3-year, $18.4 million commitment to hire 300 continuing care aides to work in long-term care and expanded home care services. The 2-year total is now 225, and the final 75 will be funded next year fiscal year. This budget establishes a new and independent agency dedicated to recruiting and retaining healthcare workers. Our goal is to bring 300 healthcare workers to Saskatchewan, and we will allocate $1.5 million to develop a reallocation incentive program to recruit the first 150 healthcare workers from the Philippines this year. $3.5 million is allocated for new physician recruitment and retention initiatives, particularly targeting family physicians working in rural areas of the province. This budget invests an additional $8 million into targeted mental health and addiction services, including effective counseling and treatments and further preventative measures. New targeted investment includes $2.1 million to add addiction spaces in high-needs areas in treatment centers across the province. This brings the total mental health and addictions investment across government to $470 million in 22-23, which is more than 7% of the total health budget. A nearly $11 million increase will support stabilization of the EMS, with additional paramedics, ambulances, and funding in 27 communities across the province, particularly in rural and remote areas. Education spending across government is $3.8 billion. This is up more than $47.2 million, or 1.3% compared to last year. Saskatchewan school divisions will receive nearly $2 billion in operating funding for the 22-23 school year, a record level and an increase of $29.4 million over last year. This will fully fund the 2% salary increase in the teachers' collective bargaining agreement, and there's also an additional $6 million in learning supports for students. A new $7 million fund will allow school divisions to hire up to 200 additional full-time educational assistants to support students and manage increasingly diverse classrooms. Affordable, accessible, high-quality childcare is a major priority in this budget. Funding for childcare and early learning is $309.6 million, including funding provided through the federal provincial early years agreements. Of that funding, $4.3 million will create 6,100 new childcare spaces, part of our government's goal to create 28,000 new regulated spaces over the next 5 years. Starting in February 2022, childcare fees were reduced by up to 50% on average in regulated care. This year's funding will support further reducing fees by September 2022, making life more affordable for Saskatchewan families. We will expand nursing seats by 150 with a $1 million increase to post-secondary institutions. More than $684 million for operating and capital grants to post-secondary institutions is included in this budget, and it includes $38 million for student supports. This budget provides social services and assistance with $1.6 billion, up nearly $67.3 million, or 4.3% compared to last year. This budget includes $11.4 million to increase Saskatchewan income support basic benefits by $30 per month and shelter benefits to $25 per month. In 22-23, the Ministry of Social Services will provide over $400 million in funding to community-based organizations. This includes increased funding of $8.7 million in 22-23 for service providers working with people with intellectual disabilities and organizations that support at-risk children, youth, and families. This increase recognizes the critical role that CBOs play in protecting the province's most vulnerable. It is part of our government's total $11.2 million, or 2% lift, for CBOs, which are also funded across government through the Ministries of Education, Justice and Attorney General, and Corrections, Policing, and Public Safety. This budget includes $936.2 million for the protection of persons and property, an increase of $91.1 million, or 10.8% from last year. There is $6.4 million to establish the Saskatchewan Trafficking Response Team and $3.2 million to expand the Crime Reduction Team. $220,000 will be added to further expand the Internet Child Exploitation Unit and allow them to further investigate and ultimately crack down on criminals who will target children. This budget includes $4.5 million for Gang Violence Reduction Strategy, which provides intervention services to individuals who want to leave gangs, as well as addictions programming in provincial correctional facilities. Our growing economy will be strengthened by further key investments. The rise in streaming services means the time is right to attract new investment from the film and television industry to Saskatchewan. This budget includes an increase of $8 million, bringing the total funds available in that program to $10 million for the Creative Saskatchewan Production Grant for film and television. This investment and the expected $50 million increase in film and television production will result in subsequent millions in annual economic activity, including significant increased spending in the hospitality industry, which was particularly hard hit by the pandemic. It will also mean growth in our information technology and digital industries. And this investment will keep dollars in the province, as only Saskatchewan labour, goods and services are eligible for support through the program. We are going to see a busy soundstage in Regina, and today I'm honoured to announce that it will be renamed the John Hopkins Regina Soundstage, honouring the memory of a strong advocate for our capital city and our province. To increase our competitiveness and attract investment, our government has enhanced the Saskatchewan Value-Added Agriculture Incentive. This incentive and others are key to our province's competitiveness, attracting private investment from global companies like BHP, Richardson International, Viterra, Cirrus Global Ag, Cargill, Federated Cooperatives, AGT Foods, Paper Excellence, and Red Leaf Pulp. These companies and others are investing $13.6 billion into Saskatchewan, into a new potash mine, new and expanded canola crush facilities, a wheat-based pulp plant, a renewable diesel facility, and lumber mill, and others. These investments are expected to create nearly 9,000 jobs in the construction phase and 2,330 permanent jobs going forward. This budget also includes $233 million in targeted investment to help keep the priorities of Indigenous communities, businesses, and organizations. That's up more than 20% from last year's budget. Saskatchewan has a growing number of Indigenous-owned companies employing thousands of people, generating millions in revenue each year. This budget will create the Saskatchewan Indigenous Investment Finance Corporation. The corporation will offer up to $75 million in loan guarantees for private sector lending to Indigenous communities and organizations for investment into natural resource and value-added agriculture projects. The stronger economy and higher commodity prices mean the province's revenues are expected to increase in the upcoming budget year, and our path to balance is on track. In the 2022-23 budget, revenue of $17.2 billion is forecast. This is up $2.7 billion from last year's budget. Driving our stronger revenue forecast is $8.1 billion in revenues from taxes. Non-renewable resources revenue is $2.9 billion, and this is largely due to higher potash and oil forecasts, which is the result of stronger than expected global demand. We know that resource prices can be volatile, and revenue stability is important. To help with stability and reduce our dependence on volatile resource revenues, this budget includes a few small revenue measures. The PST is broadened to match the federal GST base for admissions and entertainment events. Effective October 1st, 2022, the PST will apply to sporting events, concerts, museums, fairs, movies, gym memberships, green fees, among others. There are exemptions for child activities, school and minor league sports, nonprofits, and charities. This will add approximately $21 million in PST annually. At the same time, we're exempting audiobooks from PST as they're used widely for educational purposes and by the visually impaired, which will reduce the revenue by $100,000. Mill rates for the education portion of property tax are being adjusted slightly, bringing in approximately $20 million. $6 million of that is due to growth. Tobacco taxes are increasing by 2 cents per cigarette and 8 cents per gram of tobacco and 1.3 cents per stick of heat-not-burn products. Tobacco tax increases are effective midnight March 23rd and are expected to generate $12.1 million in additional annual revenue. Expense of $17.6 billion is projected in the 22-23 budget, an increase of $531 million, or 3.1% over last year. There is $3.2 billion in capital investment planned in 22-23, which is a record investment in Saskatchewan. This budget includes $156.6 million for healthcare capital, and that includes $15.2 million for urgent care centers in Regina and Saskatoon, $13.5 million to continue construction on Prince Albert Victoria Hospital, $6 million to continue the replacement of the Weyburn General Hospital, $6.5 million to continue design and procurement activities for specialized and standard long-term care beds in Regina, $3 million for Grenfell, and $2 million for LaRange long-term care facilities. This budget includes $846 million to operate, build, maintain, and improve over 1,100 kilometers of the province's roads and highways through the Ministry of Highways. Upgrades include Highway 3 twinning west of Prince Albert and Highway 5 corridor improvements east of Saskatoon. Planning and pre-construction for twinning projects on Highway 6 and 39 near Regina and Weyburn are part of this budget. There is $168.6 million for school infrastructure in this budget to support ongoing capital projects to build and renovate schools and fund relocatable classrooms. This budget includes $95.2 million to support ongoing planning and construction of 15 new schools and the renovation of 5 existing schools in Regina, Lloydminster, Saskatoon, Moose Jaw, Carrot River, La Loche, Blaine Lake, Lanigan, Yorkton, North Battleford, and Wilcox. These are just a few of the capital investments in this budget. A strong economic recovery means the province's finances have improved significantly. Our government's plan to balance is on track. This budget strengthens and protects Saskatchewan. It includes record investment into health, education, social services, and the protections of people and property. There is strong investment to help our growing economy grow further. And this budget includes record capital investments to further help ignite our economy and build a better Saskatchewan. A growing economy, more jobs, record investment in major projects, and a strong commitment to improving government programs and services means Saskatchewan is back on track. Thank you.
Are we all set?
I am.
Okay, good. Facing record a deficit and record spending coming out of the pandemic, I'm really curious to know what the nature of the budget debate was like in caucus and cabinet. How did you choose this particular path, which seems to be somewhat of a compromise between big cuts like we saw in 2017 versus larger spending reductions or larger deficit reductions? Was it a spirited debate? Was there a lot of debate on this particular matter? How did you choose this particular path?
Actually, it wasn't particularly a heated debate. As you can see, we definitely prioritized health in this particular budget. I think there was shortfalls identified due to the pandemic that we felt that we needed to prioritize and address. The surprise was how quickly our economy was recovering. And so it was actually a positive experience because revenues are strengthening that we didn't anticipate, obviously, a year ago when we were in the heat of the pandemic and the economy had taken a huge dive. But it was very much around, let's not go into the trap that we've been in the past, which is to become totally reliant on resource revenues. Right now, those resource revenues are extremely high. We don't know how long that will last. There is a number of factors driving those prices, and they're not going to hold forever. So the discussion very much was around, we need to increase our investment in a number of areas, but let's be mindful that we're doing it with the economic growth in mind that is stable and ongoing year over year.
You mentioned, turn the bass down. You mentioned uncertainty. I'm wondering what you can say about what's happening in Ukraine and what that may have as an impact on what we could see in the year to come as far as the revenues of the government, and in addition, also the uncertainty with the pandemic.
We have built in the healthcare budget an additional $95 million, sort of to address potential pandemic pressures in healthcare, should it be needed. But the risk definitely in this budget and for all of us going forward is going to be, how high will inflation go due to circumstances both with the pressures and the spending through the pandemic, as well as the global issues. There is no doubt that the political climate due to what's happening in Ukraine is a risk. Disruptions to the supply chain, which was already there, is being even more accelerated due to the war. Of course, in Saskatchewan, as reliant as we are on agriculture, the weather is always my nail biter, and hopefully we have a much better year than we did last year. So it would be inflation, it would be sort of that uncertainty globally due to what is happening in Europe, supply chain disruptions, and of course our best Saskatchewan, our most favorite Saskatchewan topic of weather.
Hi there. So there's going to be new PST charges on some services. So I'm just trying to get a sense of how this budget addresses affordability for people. Can you touch on that?
So each and every budget address affordability in a number of initiatives that we've had that are ongoing. The largest of which was, of course, a significant reduction in personal income tax, which reduced the income tax for individuals by up to $2,000, and that's ongoing year over year, and it's indexed so that it responds to inflationary pressures. We also have a number of tax credits for families with the child, I'm trying to remember the name of it, for their activities, for children's activities. And there are a number of tax credits for individuals with disabilities as well as caregivers of individuals with disabilities. There's home renovation tax credits. We have a very good child drug plan so that children's drugs are subsidized as well as seniors' drugs. For affordability specific changes to this budget, it would be for families, it would be the child care costs are going to be reduced even further, which is a huge savings for our families. And then for the seniors is the 7th increase to the seniors income plan for the low-income seniors. Those are the two that come off the top of my head right now.
Hi, Minister. I got two questions continuing on the PST. You know, inflation's gone up, grocery bills are up, it costs people more than $100 to fill a tank, and now they're going to look at this budget and say, wow, I'm getting dinged now on the PST side. The entertainment, the rider game, my golf games, I mean, I appreciate this summer, maybe not until October, but what do you say to someone saying to, like that will say this afternoon, wow, what else can they ding me for?
You know, there's true, but I do think Saskatchewan people do want to see a stable base to their government's budgets going forward, and that we're not knee-jerk reacting to the price of oil each and every year. But what I would like to say, it will generate annually, not this year, but it will generate annually a little over $20 million. And it's interesting that our surgical wait list initiative is also a little over $20 million. And if I said to a Saskatchewan resident, you know, would you be willing to pay this for maybe the 2 concerts and the rider ticket in order for us to address the very critical surgical wait list? Because we all know someone, if we're not that someone, we know someone in our family that their quality of life isn't what it should be because they need a knee or hip replacement. I think Saskatchewan people will support that.
And then, sorry, as a quick follow-up, continuing on affordability, they've all had to, families across this province have had to tighten their belts during the pandemic, and you've got a deficit because you're spending more than you're taking in when everyone else is budgeting their household. So can you just speak to that and why you feel that deficit is fine for the next couple of years, please?
I think we're going to see, and I'm optimistic that we can maybe not have the deficit as much as is projected, but we'll see how it goes. With a significant, unprecedented private sector investment into our province, I think that economic growth is going to bode well to the provincial revenues, but also to the people in the province. These are going to be really good jobs. And so there will be some pressure, actually, in labor pressure, but as those workers come in, it's going to help our restaurants, it's going to help our small businesses, it's going to help everybody. And so I think that rather than doing cuts now, let's invest the money in places where people want it and will expect it, and let's get this province growing, and that deficit will narrow as we go forward when we get some economic activity accelerating within our province.
With regard to the agriculture value-added incentive, why was it necessary to enhance it? All those announcements had already been made, and I'm wondering if this was something the government promised to them?
So through myself, the Minister of Trade and Export, there is a number of negotiations with each and every one of the investments that has come forward. And face it, we are competing with other jurisdictions that also, for recovery out of the pandemic, are very, very interested in these investments. So basically, they will approach the province and say, I'm looking at Saskatchewan and maybe, I don't know, Montana or Manitoba, and what can you do for me and make it worthwhile for us to come to Saskatchewan? So I can't divulge any, the confidential information of any one of those negotiations, but we do put forward a package of what we can offer the different corporations in order for them to build here, and we definitely will benefit from it in the long run because it is jobs, and that's extremely important for our province.
Hi, Minister. I'm just wondering if you can address how, or I guess explain how the government is addressing the volatility in non-renewable resource revenue, and if you're expecting any major windfall from oil and potash prices.
So in the past, in the fiscal year that we're operating right now, I mean, we did experience a bit of a windfall. We used it to write down the operating debt of $450 million. In this particular fiscal year. It's very hard to project what will happen in the next fiscal year. We're not even in this budget yet. And so you're projecting what the average will be over the year. Should the potash, in particular, potash and oil prices be much stronger than we're projecting, that will be future discussions as to what would be a wise decision on how that money will be spent. What I really don't think we're going to do is fall in the trap of putting it into ongoing year-over-year operating costs, because we fell in that trap before, and it does not bode well for the province.
Hi there. I'm wondering what you're doing for the environment and for climate change. I didn't see that highlighted in the budget.
That, you would have to ask the Environment Minister on details on that. There's no one particular initiative that's new in this budget.
Hi, Minister. I'm just wondering if you can expand a little bit on, I guess the areas you've decided to target with the PST. I know you mentioned the surgical wait time and health being, having that offset, or, you made this comparison. You increased tax on cigarettes, things that are unhealthy, but then on the flip side, you've now applied PST to things like a gym membership or, maybe a golf course fee where people do these things to improve their health. So I'm just wondering if you can kind of talk about how you targeted specific things for the PST application.
We 100% just used what GST applies to. So it is literally aligning it with GST, which saves a lot of confusion with the different service and providers. If you have GST, if you have to collect GST, now you will have to also collect PST.
Just another question on a different topic here. The Sask Indigenous Investment Finance Corporation, I know that's mentioned there. There are a couple of different areas where you're looking to facilitate investment there. I think it's in resources and value-added ag.
Agri-food, yep.
I guess why limit it to those areas?
That is actually where there has been interest from some Indigenous groups in those particular areas. Specific, quite frankly, up in the, not limited to, but specific interest in the northern forest fringe to get involved in that industry.
I have a few here. It's from a colleague as well as some of my own. Was there any consultations that occurred with sporting and cultural groups prior to the decision to include this PSC on those organizations?
No.
No. And his other question: many small theater groups and curling clubs have struggled over the last few years of the pandemic. Why did you decide to apply the PST now when some of those groups are teetering?
It wouldn't apply to them. It doesn't apply to your small town rodeos or events because GST doesn't apply to them. This is going to be bigger concert events, your Rough Rider tickets. It's your larger events.
Okay, and for myself, I'm just wondering if I can get some insight from you on how the levels of spending that we're seeing in health, some of those initiatives you mentioned for surgeries and increasing ICU beds, were reached And, why not spend more money now to maybe bring those ICU bed numbers up or bring those surgical wait lists down, in 2 years instead of 3, 1 year instead of 3?
Capacity. It would be very, very difficult to have the capacity to address the entire surgical wait list in 1 year, because it takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of highly trained healthcare professionals, and so we also need to build the healthcare professionals as well that can address that. I used to work many years ago in the healthcare system, and I always said any bed can be an ICU bed. Put a ventilator on it, and it's an ICU bed, but if you don't have the highly trained staff to staff it, then you don't have an ICU bed. So we really need the 4 points of how we're going to increase our medical professionals are going to be very, very important to be able to address the other issues.
Hi. I guess just with the SIS system, how did you come to the $30 per month increase and the up to $25 increase for rent and whatnot?
We went on the advisement from the officials in social services.
And within that, how do you measure success within that program? I mean, there's been some talk about how there are more people that are actually using the SIS program, and I'm just wondering, what does success look like for that program?
That's a good discussion with the social services people.
My question is very simple, is why you decide for the PST to be on October 1st?
That just allows the outlets that are going to have to charge it so that we can get the information to them, make sure there's no confusion. It gives the officials in finance time to reach out to the different venues that will now have to charge it, and then they can do whatever they need to do with their mechanisms of, be it a ticketing mechanism or whatever. It just gives them time.
So for the riders, is it like because the Grey Cup is here and you want to have more tickets to sell with the PST or collect more money?
I actually, in the discussion, going back to what Murray said, what do you discuss when you're looking at a budget? We never even brought up the Riders game, and do we base this around the Riders game, yes or no? It wasn't part of the discussion.
Oh, yes, thank you. I was just kind of wondering how the government justifies to the public that we're increasing taxes on residents, but on corporations and businesses, we'll give them up to 15% tax credit on projects that can go up to $400 million for a portion of the project.
Well, there are two different discussions. I mean, if you're talking about the tax credits to attract an investment here, quite frankly, the benefits far exceed the different tax incentives that we have in order to attract corporations coming here and building facilities. That is something we desperately need. We need good jobs. We need good paying jobs in our province. When I think you were referencing the education portion of property tax, and there's been a slight adjustment there, that's on average for residents. It's on average a $13 per year increase. So it's pretty insignificant. I mean, yes, it's $13, but the two are not, in my mind, comparable.
And then a follow-up, what do you say, I know it was mentioned that there's no new capital projects that are announced this year, and I wanted to know why, and what do you say to local businesses who were hoping to rely on new projects to sustain their businesses this year?
So we have a significant number of projects that are in the queue, if you will. I listed there's 15 new schools and major renovations in the schools. There's very large capital projects in our healthcare budget, and there's smaller capital projects throughout government. There is no question we're going to have an incredible amount of construction activity happening this year. With $13.6 billion of outside private sector investment, there is going to be construction happening around this province. And a concern, quite frankly, is going to be labor. I don't think government should be adding even more projects to our list and competing for that labor. There is supply chain issues that you're probably hearing. That is a concern for government as well. That is going to drive up the cost of projects. I don't think we have a project that we're desperate to bring on our list right now. So we just felt that for those two reasons, we have a ton of construction that's going to be happening in government, probably at a greater cost than we budgeted for originally. We just are going to pause, and hopefully that between government and the private sector, we can find the laborers to do the construction that will be happening.
Just a couple of questions here. The debt is projected to be $30 billion. What's the plan in the future to address the debt in the province?
Well, the debt is there's what I call a supported debt and unsupported debt. So the Crown Corporation debt is a supported debt because, of course, the rates that we pay for our utilities makes the payments to the debt, and so that's the plan going forward. The money that we borrow for capital projects, we also invest a percentage of the money we borrow into sinking funds to help manage the future payments. So the debt that is difficult and challenging is the operating debt. By paying it down by $450 million with the excess revenue that we had in the existing fiscal year, helped to bring that debt down to a little less than $10 billion. But I don't think I've had a budget where I have said that that is a disturbing debt and it's a concern going forward. So will that be part of the talk within our government? Should there be an unexpected windfall in resource revenue of where should the money go? I think that needs to be in the mix of possibilities.
And then just another question. It's my understanding it's $95 million for COVID pressures, pandemic pressures. We've seen in the past where the government has spent above that number to
Yes.
deal with the pressures. So is that $95 million enough in your view?
Well, we'll find out come mid-year. Right now, the largest cost through the pandemic was definitely the cost for the workers. And, when you are bringing in recently retired workers to please come in the system, we were getting outside workers to try and handle the volume, as well as there was wage premiums when we had to move a worker from their normal area to another area. So, and there was overtime costs. So all of those costs were high. They needed to be made. It was important that it was made. Do we know, are we doing that as much now? No, all the workers are back into, or most of the workers are back into their regular area of employment. So we don't have those pressures right now. May those pressures help or happen again in the future? We don't know yet.
And we're going to see if we can take a call on the phone lines. Is there anyone on the phone with a question?
Sorry, who from Global News? Nathaniel Dunn. I can hear you, and I'm relaying for you.
I told Sastel to just crash. Right.
Okay, Nathaniel is looking for clarification on the PST application. He lists specifically nonprofit curling versus, I guess, for-profit curling. He just wants a little more clarification about how that is to be applied.
If it is a for-profit and they are charging GST, they will now charge PST. If it is a community that's having a little bond spiel, they would not be charging GST and they will not be charging PST.
Hi, Minister. I'm going to be cheeky, sorry. I want to get as much from you as possible. I'm just going to do quick fire hits. They'll be easy, I'm sure. Aren't you a smoker? How do you feel about that? What do you want made at the soundstage? Why no money for safe consumption site? And can you talk about provincial protection services and that change? See, easy.
Okay, we'll start with the tobacco tax. I am taking one for the team. Because, yes, I am a smoker. Your second one was the film tax?
Yeah, what do you want built there, made there? if you had a choice to
You're going to tease me on this, because when I talked to you earlier, I said at some point in time, I want to see a Hallmark movie made in Saskatchewan, filmed in Saskatchewan, because those things are, they spit them out like an incredible amount of Hallmark films. So I swear my daughter watches every one of them somehow. And so I want to see Hallmark film filmed in Saskatchewan. Third was?
Consumption.
consumption side and provincial protection services.
So the health ministers do a lot of work, in particular, Minister Hindley does a lot of work meeting with different groups and what they feel would be the maximum, in order to maximize the expenditures that we put in mental health and addictions. This is something that he feels isn't maybe the maximum. It doesn't mean that it doesn't work in budgets each and every year. It's not that you have a good idea or a bad idea coming forward. You've got competing good ideas coming forward, and you have to sort of draw the line of what you're going to bring into funding and what you are going to leave and not fund, because you cannot fund everything. So this will be increasing to naloxone kits and being able to have services not just in a single site in a single city, but as much as possible around the province to where all of our people are struggling with addictions. And the third is the protection services. And what would you like to know about them?
Why that change? Why are you consolidating them and moving people? What's the impetus for it?
You know, it's interesting, and I was minister that started when we consolidated all our services for emergency response. We found that it was far better coordinated, be that addressing forest fires or floods. It was better coordinated and easier for communities to understand what they needed to do, and we brought that all under one umbrella. And so this is somewhat that same concept. We have officers that are handling different situations in corrections, obviously, but in our environment, we've got our traffic patrol officers that are in highways. And so if there is, say, a minor crime incident and a conservation officer arrives, they don't have the authority right now to address it, so then he's got to phone the RCMP, or we also have sheriffs. This will coordinate and I think get a better response to crime that's happening on site without having to get the correct officer at the correct time in the correct place. It's not the total answer, of course, because the RCMP are under the authority of the federal government, municipal police forces are under the authority and of the municipal governments, but I think the coordination within all of the officers we have in the various areas in the provincial government could be coordinated better.
We'll go to the phone lines now.
Brian Dimchuk with Pipeline Online. Okay, I'm going to summarize. In terms of the oil prices being what they are, how you are addressing or forecasting the prices, because he feels that at the price of oil at this moment, it could cover the entire deficit for this year.
So for every $1 a barrel of oil change in Saskatchewan, that will change the budget by $14 million. So it is significant. It's not as significant as it is in Alberta. I mean, all in, $1 in Alberta is $500 million. So it still is very important. But we use industry to give us their projections on what they think it will be on average throughout the entire year. right now, a moment in time, and there's obviously unusual circumstances why oil is as high as it is. But there is some expectation it's going to be higher than it was last year, and we have built that with a average forecast of $75.75. Only time will tell. It's a volatile. That's the challenge with resource revenues, is that they are volatile.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time, and appreciate the minister's time as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good job, Minister.
Thanks. 12.1. It's 12.1. The 20 million is the PST on emissions. Yeah.